Welcome to Just Wanna Quilt, a research podcast coming out of Tulane University Law School, where we explore all kinds of things, stories about quilting, tools, field trips, maybe some famous quilters stop by, and, of course, a little bit of copyright thrown in just for fun. This is Elizabeth Townsend-Gard, your host, and I'm a law professor at Tulane University Law School and a faculty fellow at the A.B. Friedman School of Business at Tulane. And I just want to quilt. Sandra Johnson comes back for part 2, and we talk about a copyright thing that happened. It's awesome. It's really awesome, actually. Can't wait to chat.
Sandra Johnson, I'm calling from your California.
And this is our second interview. Is that right? We talked already. Correct. That's right. So I'm looking at the letter. Tell me, what we're talking about today. It's so pretty. What?
Yeah, I think I need to look at the letter too.
Okay.
We just got back from being on the road all day yesterday.
I understand. Should I read the letter? How about if I read the letter?
Sure. Go right ahead.
Okay. I found your group because of a quilt challenge for my guild, the Long Beach Modern Quilt Guild. Someone had introduced me to the work of Robert and Sonia, is it Delane? As soon as I saw their work, I knew I wanted to try some kind of quilt that reflected what they did. When my guild's challenge came up, this seemed to be a good opportunity. So I chose Endless Rhythm by Robert Delane for the foundation of my challenge quilt design. I figure artists copy still life pictures all the time, so I was thinking of it as something like that. I knew my idea could be controversial given the topic of derivative work stirred up controversy for a larger modern quilt guild a few years ago if I wanted to share it further beyond my local guild. This is where your group came in. I haven't been able to cover all the threads to get to how to explore where this fits. I knew that it was likely that the copyright for Endless Rhythm was expired, but I had a hard time discovering something that stated it specifically. What threw me off is this work owned by the Tate is also on their website to be licensed. That just didn't seem to make sense if the copyright was expired, so there is more to this beyond my non-expert knowledge and what research could get at. Also, the Tate is in the UK, so maybe different rules apply. Based on what I learned so far, I went ahead and contacted the Tate's Copyright Office to see how that would go, since this seems to be the minimal community standard of respect if a quilt strongly reflects another person's original design. That's very nice. The writing is so nice. Plus, if I ever wanted to show my work at a local show, I would be ready if this came up. Here is the exchange. Normally, I wouldn't enter my quilt in a large national show. I also decided to do that with the QuiltCon and see what happens. I can update that a bit later if anything develops. Okay, so
that's where we are.
And then what was the exchange?
Okay, so that is below in the thread.
Yeah.
I went ahead and explained to they had at the Tate copyright at tate.org.
Right.
So I just wrote.
Great. So this is so great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I said right, I'm an American Quilt with an affinity for modern design. I'm also a member of the Modern Quilt Guild. So you try to explain who you were, right. And then you explain. Right. And I'm writing to ask for the Tate for explicit permission to share my quilt at quilt shows and conventions. Further, I'd also like permission to enter it for a competition. Here's the picture of the quilt that I created below. Although not exact reproduction of the original painting, it's clear that it's based on Endless Rhythm. And there's yours. And I don't know where the original is.
So the original...
is it the top?
So I think that I sent you, remember the very nice reply that he sent.
Okay, yeah, I haven't gotten to that. I just got distracted by the beautiful quilt you made. Gosh, that was pretty.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh, it's so pretty. Okay, so what did he say?
Pardon me?
Let's take a look at his answer. Okay, dear Sandra, thank you for this. You may copy this work at your heart content as copyright has expired. Robert Delane died in 1941, more than 70 years ago, meaning his artwork no longer has copyright. As far as we're concerned, as the owners of the object, you may proceed happily as planned, perhaps referencing when possible the underlying work is in the Tate's collection. This may be an interest of fans to you. So, right, okay. You are like a dream come true, Sandra. So first of all, you asked for permission. Yes. Let's look at sort of what they're saying, and then let's check to see what the status is here in the U.S. because you're using it in the U.S., which means that U.S. law. So if you enter quilt shows around the world except the U.S., it's out of copyright. The U.S. has stupidly different rules. So we'll look at the rules here to see whether it's out of copyright or not. Now, the Tate has given you permission, but we don't know what this is here. So where is the so let's go to
I'm the underlining work link.
Yeah, do you have the underlying work? Oh, there it is. Okay, I found it. So the underlying work, yeah, right. So it's very close, right? It's different, but it's very close. I mean, it is clearly inspired. Gosh, it's so pretty. So it's from 1934, and in the U.S., we want to know. Hold on, I need to figure out how to get to this. We're doing. You're like an advertisement for me. So in the U.S., we have a number of steps for works that are from 1924 to 1963. So duration in the U.S. is really stupid. And I've spent 10 years working on duration. So that tells you how incredibly stupid it is to spend as much time as I do now with quilting on copyright duration, right? So when you look at this painting, because it's 1934, what we have to do, and it says image released. Now, the image released is different than the actual object, right? So the fact that they had the image was under the photograph they took, they said was under Creative Commons, but the underlying work might not be. So what we want to know is this work, was this work renewed? Now, let's go back. It's totally the funny day to do this because I'm so tired. Okay, so copyright law changed. So copyright law begins in 1790 in the U.S. Right as we're baby, but the Copyright Office keeps in mind on how it figures out whether you have copyright or not. So under the 1909 Act, which is what this falls under, you had to put a proper copyright notice on a work to get protection. Which, oh, it's British. Is he British? Is he British? He's French. All right, so French is bad.
Was created in France.
Is he? He's a Frenchie, though, right?
Yeah, they're kind of, yeah. I think.
All right, so then we have to do something different. So this
was made when they were in France.
And when did he die? In 1941.
Correct.
Yeah, it's in the public domain in the U.S. I can't quite explain to you why. I mean, I can. We can go through that. The work was restored. The work was in the public domain for a long time in the U.S. because it probably didn't have proper notice and it didn't get renewed. It fell into the public domain. Okay. Then we were really mean to foreign works, so it got restored if it met certain requirements. You have to look. One of the things, and again, if people are listening to this, what this tells you is come talk to me. Like these are not easy things, right? So. This one did not get restored because it didn't meet the requirements in France because he died in 1941. And so it wouldn't have been eligible for restoration. But that differs for each country. I just happen to know France I just know France. So I can write you. So we do this for companies and other people, but I can do this for you because I have never thought about this. So we can do it today. We have time to do it. What I can do is give you a letter that is from our company, which is our company is called Limited Times, and it's the Durationator. But we can just do a quick letter for you that allows you to tell anyone where you register, where you show it, that it is out of copyright throughout the world, that the Tate Museum you asked permission and the Tate Museum confirmed that, and that we at the Durationator also say it's out of copyright. And that way you can show it anywhere you want, in any instance, without any worry at all. I would encourage you to, I think you found the right website. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then let's talk more about how this would work for other people, because I do think that there is an instance where you now we're trying to do a bigger business that we'll talk about this, but I think that for quilters, you guys need a letter that lets people know that you haven't done anything wrong, right? And that you're allowed to use it. So you
Right.
need a quick check, and you probably don't need as much as, say, a movie company. We work with the content industry, and we work with libraries. When they come to us, they want a whole bunch of stuff. But I mean, I'm not charging you today, so that's my
Okay.
other hat. You're our experiment. If you're cool with that, and we'll use you
I'm
as an example.
absolutely cool with that. This is
Um,
perfect. This is actually better than I hoped for because I
uh,
really kind of feel like this kind of thing needs to be tested out.
hugely. So the
Right.
question is, how much would a quilt person pay to have this service done? And what does it look like when that happens? I
Yeah,
don't,
because that
and the
sounds
problem is we have to pay people to, I mean, we have to pay our graduates to do it. So thoughts about that? Like, how much would you have, you're not getting charged today. How much would you have paid to know this information? And we
yeah.
could have figured out, you wouldn't have had to go to the Tate, although I really like that you did, because we would have figured out quickly that it was out of copyright everywhere.
Right.
Um,
Well, and like I said, the thing that kind of threw me off, I kind of thought it was in kind of the common domain. And my niece, who's an art student, was like, yeah, you can absolutely do that. I mean, she didn't even think twice about it. Um,
Yeah, it wasn't
and for her,
necessarily
it was
under the copy. I mean, you
transformative.
lucked out. So there's a lot of ways that this could have been still protected. If he had been,
But the licensing, the licensing kind of threw me.
the licensing this image is the image itself, because you can get a
Right.
high quality image, and that's what museums are.
You see, and then they could put it on T-shirts and mugs and all kinds of things, right?
Exactly. And we have a company we're working with called Culture Tech that's trying to make this transaction easier for high, like, um, people, right? So they're trying to say, like, can I use this image and get permission? And we've been working with them for like a year. Um, and that's what they do. And the thing is that, and we've been talking to them about this for quilters, of how we could adapt their software to quilting people. The
Right.
question is sort of where's the revenue on that? Like how much would a quilter pay to know this information? And maybe they wouldn't, but the question is,
And
how do
there are
you
a
make
lot
it a
of people in our
sustainable
field.
thing?
Yeah, there are a lot of people in our field who are notoriously frugal. But I mean, when you're talking about a quilt designer or someone who enters into shows
Yeah,
that have like high quality quilts, and then there are people who get commissioned to make
yeah,
quilts as part of open spaces, say in banks and
yeah.
hospitals and things like that. I think how much you're willing to pay kind of has to do a little bit about where you
How
are
you're going to use it.
own development, right? Because if
That's right.
I'm entering in Paducah or something like that,
And
um,
maybe that it impacts on the price of it as well.
it does.
Because,
It does. Because
yeah,
I did enter this in QuiltCon, and it was fortuitous that our interview ran so long that I didn't know at that time, but it got in.
it did.
It did.
That is so cool. Are you going to QuiltCon?
Absolutely, I am, and
That's
I'm
so cool. We have
available
to
on
like go
Saturdays
see
between
it
o'clock.
there,
Huh?
right? You and I have to go and stand by it and
Absolutely.
take a picture, because that is so cool.
In fact, I was really kind of bummed because I had to make a choice between, I can't remember which days your lecture is or your class is, but
Yeah, I don't know either.
I got into both Victoria Finlay Wolf and Denise Schmidt's classes, and those are kind of like, those were people for whom I would travel
Hugely, but
to take a class. And so it's like, I got lucky. And so,
yeah,
but then I'm free Saturday and Sunday, so
cool.
doing a little volunteering. But I also won my Modern Quilt Guild challenge for my guild itself
Yeah.
too, which was
It's a
really
great
cool.
piece. It's such a great piece. Now, are you going to make a pattern of this piece, do you think?
So that's the next part. Our
Totally can.
president is ready. He said, "I want to make this quilt. I want."
Yeah,
And
I want to make it too.
and I will help you do it. And we both use like all the Adobe suite. So I think it'll be a good partnering because I think that Jeff will be really good at writing the instructions and everything. What he didn't understand is how I constructed it. And that is to me, we always, it's funny. That's not the copyrightable part, right?
But instructions. Well, it's interesting. I think it's not the copyrightable part. I have a new.
You broke up.
Yours won't be because the original art is out of copyright. But here's my theory: if let's say this was under copyright,
right,
and you tell people exactly how to make it, why is the code for making it protected? The outcome is. So my thing is so recipes weren't protected because what you made was a useful article, a cookie. But I think that this is more like software, which the functionality. And so I think that I think in some way directions are protectable. Not yours because you're going to do a public domain image,
right.
But your version of it, the way you quilted it, and the selection and arrangement and coordination of this public domain image that you made, that's protected by copyright for a very long time, your life plus 70 years. So your version is protected, but the underlying work is not protected.
So this would be worth doing just to see how this plays out, because we're talking about doing it for our quilt guild as a fundraiser or something like that. Just see what we get out of it.
So let me ask you another question. Oh, goodness. Hold on. There's kitten. The kitten's going to mess us up. Okay. Just be reasonable. Come here. Come here, Ben.
Asking a cat to be
Oh, okay. It's something or something. I know. Another question for you. This is all related. So you make the pattern for your modern quilt guild, and you see if people purchase it or you guys do it as a way. Will you charge for the pattern, do you think?
I imagine we will.
Yeah. So we got to think about something that's reasonable for artists that are trying to clear something. Because we just had this today, which is so interesting. Another person just before asked about the fact that they had done exactly what you did.
Oh, you're cutting out.
And so they were like, now what do I do? Because I've already made the quilt.
Right.
And I'm like, well, you just need to get permission, right? So that's easy because we can easily say under that situation, it goes through the system that we know exactly what it is that you need to get permission, or fair use.
Right. Well, to be honest, I wasn't going to ask for permission until I knew what it looked like at the end.
Yeah, right.
I saw what it looked like, and it's like, okay, something this may or may not ever get into the show, and it'll be really interesting for me because I got to tell you, it looks really cool and everything, but I'm ready for the criticism. There are valid criticisms with the quilt. I mean,
where they are. So you're curious if they see the same thing that you see.
Well, it'll be interesting, but I know what's fair. There's like the paneling system at QuiltCon's really interesting. They have a non-quilter, a modern quilter, and then somebody who's like more traditional, I believe, something like that.
Uh-huh.
So it'll be very interesting to see what comes back. But yeah, I mean, I kind of, this is the first time I've quilted something this big, and I wanted to
amazing
myself because I was like, okay, something, I got to do it. So
yeah.
Stitches are not perfect. It's not like when you go to like Road to California or Houston or anywhere Quilt IMC is seeing. I mean, I sat there and walked up and like looked at the stitching, and it's like,
yeah,
it's not that kind of stitching.
Yeah.
But it's okay, Yeah. I think this is a different judging system. I think they're finding their own judging system.
Yeah.
But once it was up there, I was like, okay, something, I need to take the next steps. And I kind of knew I knew when I started that there might be future steps. So I was thinking really hard about it. But, and particularly like my time and everything like that, I would never consider doing a pattern unless somebody was going to do the heavy lifting on that. So I'll have to talk to him about that. Yeah.
Okay. So step one, you come to us to get a letter to clear it or to know how you can use this work. And we can give you a simple letter that says whatever it is, that to whom it may concern, and whatever. So simple letter. We'll see if we can get that done on the system. And then depending on what you want to use it for, we have, I mean, the reason that it would be more money if you were trying to do it, if you were trying to um, use it commercially. Let's say you were going to make, you were going to send it to China and you were selling it to J.C. Penney's to make quilts for beds. Then you would want a full report because you would want to be sure
And that
that
right there, I think, is where you kind of like get into it. It's like, even though it's in the common domain, I mean, that one feels really different than
yeah.
showing it at shows, right?
Yeah, because you are relying on it for a business. So if you're going to rely on it for a business that somehow somebody would come to you and say, you know, they threaten you in some sort of way,
Right.
you want to make sure that you can have a full report that says, look, here is our full report. And I know you're sad that you think, I know you're upset that you think that it's, but here's the full report, right?
And that person should pay more, right?
That person should pay more. That should just be the regular fees,
Absolutely.
because that's what we're doing. And we don't guarantee results or anything like that. It's
No.
research, but
And
it
it's like a
allows your
business license,
attorney,
right?
right?
It's
Exactly. So
like a business license. It's like having insurance,
exactly,
and that kind of thing.
exactly.
This is the cost of doing business.
Right. And you would likely in the situation two, go to your attorney. And what the full report allows is for your attorney to quickly get up to speed. So that's what we really are, assisting attorneys. So
Mhm.
our idea is that, you know, your attorney is super smart. They just haven't spent 10 years looking at copyright duration around the world, but we can give them a 20-page report that if they read it, they're like, oh yeah, it's under, you know, they can give you the opinion and it takes them 5 to 10 minutes to read the report as opposed to 30 hours to do the research. So that's our kind of
And
our
not only
niche
that, yeah. And
is
if
that
anything comes up, then he's
they
the
can
person that any
exactly.
entity that
That's
has
right.
beef with you would go
That's
to.
right.
And
That's right.
they're not, I mean, there's nothing more intimidating. I
Yeah.
noticed this with my father in particular. It's like, there's nothing more intimidating than somebody sitting there saying, you're going to get a letter from my lawyer.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And
That's
it's
right.
like, go ahead.
Right.
you
Exactly.
know, you have
Exactly.
no standing.
Exactly.
Kind of thing,
Exactly.
but whatever kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, and what's good about your particular system is that I kind of feel like that fits. It works for people who are large corporations, but it also works for the little guy.
That's exactly why we did it. So I'm all about the little, I mean, as you know from this project, I'm all about everybody.
Right.
So the idea is to, yeah, to be able to, anybody who wants, I mean, for a long time when we were building it, we did it for free for 8 to 10 years. Anybody that came to us, we did for free, whether it was the Library of Congress or a local artist, we were doing that work for free, because we were testing the system,
Mhm.
and we felt like, well, if we're gonna be friends with Harvard and do work for Harvard, why wouldn't we do it for some local artist or for somebody else? Like we have to
Right.
be like, if we're going to do it for free, we have to do it everywhere. So
Well,
we did that for a really long time.
and most universities do have as a part of their mission statement something about serving the community.
Exactly. Now
Right.
this project has moved out of the university, because they don't want us working one-on-one with people because they don't want the liability. So
Right.
now it's this little teeny tiny company that my husband and I have that's called Limited Time. So
Right.
you get us, anything that was, so what the difference between the free version at the university, which we don't do anymore, was that anything that we did, like today when I said, well, we'll use you as a sample and an example, that meant that you're still at the Copyright Research Lab, we'll do it there, that we're going to use it for research, we're going to talk about it, we're going to, you know what I mean? Like it's not
Right.
private. And with Limited Times, it is more private because we often have people who don't want to be known. They don't want that information out there. So that's the other part, is that it becomes a more private space.
Well, it'll be a good
Yeah.
case study at very least. And then you can use that as an example of how this works, because I think this doesn't just work for quilters. This works for a lot of makers.
Yeah.
And it seems to be more people are trying to break out on their own and, do their own
Yeah.
thing. I mean, Etsy.
Yep.
I mean, look at
Yep.
Etsy for crying out loud. It's
Yep.
amazing. That's how a lot of small businesses seem to be reaching their audience.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right. The
And
other part that we're
I think you
thinking
really
about,
want me to pay $50 for a simple tote bag? Come
right,
on.
right. I know.
Yeah, I recognize that fabric from Joann's.
Right, exactly.
So
Exactly.
sometimes it's like you look at it, it's like, yeah, that's not really what that costs, except for your time, maybe.
Yeah.
And it is the time issue as well. Um,
Right, they're being a sewist. That's what Tula Pink said. That like what you're hiring people do on in these situations where they take someone else's pattern, they make it. She was all like, you have to buy my pattern each time you make it," which I don't think is that seemed weird. But um,
mhm.
but she was like, "You're a sewist, so you take my latest pattern and you make it and you sell it. There, it's not your artistic design; it's your ability to sew it that they're paying for."
Well, the way I looked at it is like if I sat there and saw, say, a Tula Pink pattern or an Allison Glass pattern that was really complicated, that was way above my head, and
Yeah,
but I really wanted it, and I wanted it in my colors to go into my home.
right.
I have a friend who's a designer. What she would do is she would go and find somebody to make it. She would go
Yeah.
pick out the fabrics and she would take a percentage, but the person who would be making it, she would buy the pattern for me. I
Uh-huh.
mean, like, I would buy the pattern and I would buy the fabric, or my designer would help me find the fabric, and we would turn it over to somebody to construct it, kind of thing. Um,
Yeah.
it's just like if I paid somebody to come in and make curtains for my windows. Now, anybody who does that can sit there and like they just know how to make
That's right. You're hiring him as a sewist. That's right.
right. They're
That's
just so
totally
you're
okay.
just hiring somebody that does this, that does home
Right.
design, quilt, or in this case, quilting.
Right.
I think that there's decent money to be had there.
Yeah, I agree. I
It's
think that weird platform I'm talking about, I think you could have people advertising as people who are willing to sew things, people that are willing, that commissioned works. Also, people who are willing to do binding, like if you want
I
to send your quilts to be bound or whatever, or locally, so that
right.
you know sort of where it is. But I think it's different than Etsy. I think it's a
Oh no, this
community
is absolutely
platform.
different. This
You
is
know,
actually a
yeah,
lot of these people don't even. I mean, I'm like thinking about this right now, even for my own home. A lot of these people, you find them by word of mouth.
yeah,
And the way I view them is they're like a painter, they're like a designer, a home designer.
yeah,
And because people can do these things for themselves, I think that they kind of have a skewed version, a skewed idea of what it really costs to
yeah.
support that kind of enterprise. But
That's right.
I mean, I had a friend who was a designer, was opening a design business, and I said, well, we were talking about, again, this was when I first bought my home, curtains of all things. And
Right,
she said, no, I would just send it down to a cut house downtown, and they would sew it right up. This is what they do.
right.
And you don't necessarily find these people in the yellow pages. It's just
Yeah,
word of mouth for you.
yeah,
So okay, so this is like, okay, so the crafts fee thing, right?
yeah.
So of course, I found crafts fee. I don't know. I'm
Right.
having,
The hardest thing to ever say. Their
really,
name is the right.
but what I noticed was like there was like there's a point at which it became unusable, and
Yeah, it did.
you're like
It
really
got
looking at
flooded,
that,
right?
and you're like, that is just an Ohio store. I am not buying a pattern for an
That's
Ohio
right.
store. And why are
That's
you
right.
charging me $20 for that?
That's right.
Kind of thing.
That's right.
And then a little bit of it's just arrogance maybe on my part, but a little bit on that side too. But then you have like really good complicated stuff, and then of course there's the common complaint. Nah, they put these patterns out without them being tested out, and
That's right.
too.
That's
So
right.
quality control, and I kind of feel like there was a tipping point at which it became almost. I was spending more time trying to find a pattern on Etsy than it would have taken me to figure it out myself to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Unless somebody's sitting there promoting their patterns and they happen to end up on my reader feed or whatever, those were much easier to
Yeah.
ferret out. But it's like how do you do your quality control,
How do you do quality control
right?
and not lose? So what's interesting about that, and they were so funny because one of the things that in their letter that they released, craftsy had to do with intellectual property issues. And one of the things that happens is if you start to police what's on your platform, you lose, there's a part of the Copyright Act that protects internet service providers, but you have to let people post whatever they post and not interfere, and unless you find it's willful infringement. You can't have willful blindness.
Right.
But you can kind of see the problem. Yeah, just write something out. I don't know what we're going to do. I mean, I'm kind of in this project is so bizarre because it goes in all these directions. And so I'm not sure what we're doing with all of it, but I think it's all going to come together in an interesting way. So I think that there's another person that used a public domain image of an octopus. And we talked, and she had already seen it in a public domain book, but then she saw it at Joann's, and then she kind of got freaked out because they had also used it on fabric. And so that's a really interesting story, and she did a ton of research. So I'm just thinking about your piece and her piece and other pieces of like real world examples of where copyright intersects with what you're doing.
You could write up case studies.
Yeah, exactly.
That would be enormously valuable.
Exactly. And the thing that we're doing now with the blocks is another example of it. So what I'm trying to understand with that, so we did it faster than I thought because I was talking to someone and she posted, and suddenly we had to do it yesterday. But the idea is for people to do 6.5-inch block and send it to me in the JustWannaQuilt colors, but that we can better understand, like, what do you think is something that is just in the public domain? Like, where did you get your inspiration? What did you do? Sort of what is the common, how do people feel about it? And can we understand what this system is by people making block? And already we're finding that some people get it, and some people are like, oh, I got this from a Pat Sloan pattern. And I'm like, well, that's under copyright. So that's really interesting. But they didn't different between.
Pat Sloan was giving away, depending upon this, if it was a splendid sampler, which are the exact same size as your block on that post.
That's right, it is.
Right now,
that's right.
Sampler 2, everything's free.
Until the end,
one was originally free, were you part of that first iteration? Did you download that pattern originally? And people donated that. Now it's in a book. So now
I have the book, right?
Together, they're in a book. Now you could go out and still find the tutorials at the individual designers' websites. But yeah, I was looking at that. I was trying to figure out how. While I was waiting for you, I was trying to find my Brackman number for what I was going to do for that.
Oh, very cool. So, and I think that
I was like, okay, so how am I going to explain it? And the only thing I can think of is like, as far as resources, I will be using like blog posts that I bookmarked in
that's great, and that's exactly right.
How to do.
That's right. That's exactly it. And I think one of the things we might do with it, I mean, we had a really short deadline just to get a sense of sort of how much people will participate in this. But you can also see people asking people to go and ask other people to do it. So sort of how far can we go? Because I think this is on the academic side, and see if you think that this is true, Sandra, is that I think this is a really interesting barometer to understand where people are getting their patterns from.
Right.
Like what do you think's common? Where do you get your directions from? Mm-hmm. What is this world? It's a way to, because you fill in this form that sort of tells me where, how you made it, what techniques you used, all that kind of stuff. So it's and it's not very arduous. Like one block, that was the idea, is it wasn't very arduous. And I think in that case, that potentially could be a book in itself. That's why we're asking people to do all the citations and stuff, because it could be that we find this incredible, like it could be that only 4 people do it. I'm totally okay with that. That's okay. That's totally like people are
more with your quilting army.
Yeah.
Half-inch block, and almost everybody can do that.
Yeah, exactly. And then the idea is sort of, if we have all this instruction and these beautiful samples, why not make our own version of like the Splendid Sampler or JustWannaQuilt book that is all of the stuff that we do in all the different ways. And that's another way to support the project.
We recorded these conversations in December, and since then we have created the Common Pool block project, and it's still going. So if you listen to this podcast and want to send us a block, totally do that. So 6.5-inch block, a public domain image or a public domain block. Explain to us if you go to our website, The Common Pool block challenge is up there, and you can sort of get the directions, send it to the law school, do it in the Just Wanna Quilt colors. That is awesome, which are blue, green, pink, and orange. And then you can also use black and white. And we're just continuing we're getting a lot of them, and we're continuing for a bit longer. So if you listen to this and it's 2019, just keep sending the blocks. So yeah. We also talked about the Durationator, which is my daytime gig. So if you have a question about copyright, particularly if you're trying to determine the copyright status of work, if you are trying to determine the status of your work, or you want to use someone else's work, you can go to the Durationator.com. That's DURATIONATOR. And that's where that information is. And we are thrilled if you have questions. That's there's various types of services available there, and that's outside of the university, so that's a private company. It was great talking to Sandra. I can't wait to talk more to her. And we'll keep playing on copyright and entrepreneurship and quilting and all kinds of other things.
So you've been listening to Just Wanna Quilt, a research podcast coming out of Tulane University Law School. And I'm Elizabeth Townsend Gard. If you like this podcast, keep listening. Also, we have a Facebook group. Come join us. We talk about a lot of things. We also have an Instagram account. And of course,